Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this month's Zoominar related to sports chaplains, character coaches. How do we serve well in this environment where we are presently? The big idea of today is we're going to talk about the NC2A transfer portal and how that's affecting sports teams in college, the coaching staffs, the players. What are the problems associated with it? How do you see coaches approaching it? How are the various ways they're trying to deal with it? And then lastly, most germane to us is where are the ministry opportunities presented because of this new environment where we find ourselves? How do we serve really well in light of these matters? I have a couple of folks joining us in particular today that are in touch with coaches all the time about these kind of things. One of those being Mike Lightfoot from Nations of Coaches, and another one who will join us shortly is Brian McKenzie from Fellowship of Christian Athletes Football in the Midwest region of the U.S. He's in touch with college football coaches all the time, and he's hearing how they're approaching this matter. So we'll get those guys going in a minute. Steve Roberts from Nations of Coaches down in South Carolina. Sir, would you please pray to start things?
Absolutely. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this day and the many blessings that you've already given us this day. Continue to serve us well. Give us wisdom. Open our hearts and our ears as Roger leads us today. And Lord, just want to thank you for all the character coaches that are on and the ones that aren't, and just continually give them impact as they go through each day with each team. And whatever we do, we'll always give you the honor and glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks very much. Other folks have joined us or are joining us, and we say welcome to you guys. Mike Lightfoot, may I please ask you to talk a little bit about the problems you're hearing coaches talk about as they talk about the transfer portal? What are the primary problems they're dealing with since it's poked its head up?
There's a lot of them, and I'm sure everyone's aware of them. But in many cases, what has happened is the mid-majors have become now minor league systems to the high majors. I think that's one of the things that is very important for all of us to understand, that when you develop a young player, you maybe found a jewel, and you've recruited him and you built a relationship with him and you developed him, and then you've made him a really good player. No longer is that player going to stay at your institution. So I think that's probably the biggest concern that the coaches at the mid-majors I talk to have. So that creates an environment where coaches now have to do a tremendous job of building relationships with their kids. And probably the biggest part of that is making sure that they're constantly re-recruiting their kids and their parents.
Yeah.
So successful programs in the mid-major area are spending a lot of time recruiting the parents and calling the parents. Whereas before, once you had a kid, you didn't call the parents unless there was something dramatic happening. Now they have to make weekly calls or bi-weekly calls to those parents to make sure that they're on the same page and that relationship's there for them.
I hear you saying that related to mid-majors, and the way I've been expressing that is right now this has turned everybody that's not in the Power Five, everybody is being treated like a JUCO presently. Is that also happening at NAIA, Division II, Division III? Is it also impacting them in that same way?
Not as much, Roger. I think that at the NAIA level, we've seen a handful of young men who are All-Americans that have ventured up maybe to D1, a few of them to D2. That has not been the trend. It's usually this has been created through pretty much the D2 and the D1 level, where the D2 players are thinking they could play at a higher level, so they put their name in a portal. And I was just reading this morning of a great study that's done that half of the kids that have been in the portal last year did not find a team. So, those are some dynamics that we're all faced with now, with kids thinking the grass is going to be greener on the other side and find out that there's no other side. So this has become a serious problem. And the other article response I thought was really good, is that the stress that puts on current players, on a team, that they're worried about their best player leaving.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I was
so,
coach. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, but I just think all those dynamics have created an environment where coaches no longer can coach like they did. They have to be a transformational coach, not a transactional coach. They have to be highly relational in everything they do, and they've got to encourage their staff and their support staff to be highly relational with their players so that they feel comfortable and they don't leave because they think there's something better out there.
Yep. I was talking with a coach just yesterday about one of his players and the tension between, we'd like to redshirt this kid so he has a chance to develop more, but we're not sure if we do that, he may say, that's it, I'm out. And you lose him even. So it's really kind of truncating the process of development that a lot of coaches really want for their players because they're just not sure they can keep them.
Right. And so it has recreated a whole another level of stress. And I strongly believe that coaches that are in the upper echelon of their careers are getting out of it because of that. They no longer want to be a part of this whole thing of the portal and re-recruiting their kids all the time and not being able to coach them like they normally would and coach them maybe hard and demanding. So that has created a lot of stress in the college basketball. Well, not just college basketball, but all the athletic sports across the country at the D1 and some at the D2 level.
Yep. I think when I saw Jay Wright from Villanova jump out, he did not say it expressly that was why he was going to leave the game, but that's got to be a factor, don't you think?
Well, there's no question. I think we're going to see a major exodus of coaches at that level, just saying it's not worth it anymore. Either I can go up and be at the pro level and just coach and not have to worry about the portal, or I need to just get out and enjoy my life and not have the stress level that the portal brings to everybody. So yeah, I think we're going to see more of that. It's becoming a different game for coaching, and no longer is it about the coaches. It's the players' game now. We just have to understand that and adapt to it because it's not going to change.
Yeah, it's in a sense taken what was NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball free agency, and it's pushed it down into the college realm.
Yeah, I was talking to Matt Painter about this at Purdue, and he was saying, I'm in the luxury that I can find another player. I can find a great player once maybe one of my guys goes in the portal, but the mid-majors cannot. They cannot fix the problem by bringing in someone equal to or better than someone special that they've created in their program. So, the coaches are on edge all the time. They're looking over their shoulder. When you see a high-level freshman at a mid-major, chances are they're not going to be there next year. And that coach is thinking, I'm giving this kid all the minutes and opportunities with the understanding that next year he's not going to be there. And where will I be now? Will I be able to replace him? So that creates a whole nother dynamic for coaches and the support staff.
Some of you other guys are involved not only in basketball, but also in football, baseball, other sports. Could some of you guys open your mic and tell us what you're hearing from coaches as being these central problems they're encountering with the transfer portal? Rich Duffield, are you hearing things in particular from your coaches?
I mean, a lot of the same stuff.
Yep.
I think it's still a mystery in many ways as to how to handle it and what to do. There's a general idea. I remember first hearing like, well, why would I ever recruit another high school player?
Yep.
But then I've seen that kind of, maybe it switched to where, I mean, I know we've signed a couple of high school players, and so maybe the mentality is, it is what it is. We'll just have to, if we recruit a gym and he develops, then I just have to go find another one next year.
Yep. Gotcha. Jim Collins, you're around baseball people all the time. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm not hearing as much from baseball currently, but I just this is the first year of a new basketball staff at Illinois State.
Yep.
And I can tell you, you guys mentioned the word JUCO. And I think that's one of the things they're kind of recognizing they have to coach a little more like a JUCO, where if you get a player in. But I would also tell you that I think one of the strategies, from what I can tell, is they're probably paying a little more attention to local recruiting, because with the idea that if you can recruit a kid closer to home, maybe that allows you to a chance to keep him longer.
Gotcha.
But I also wanted to say I work with the Division III football team, and while it may not have the same effect as it is on the mid majors, it is impacting them. This year, it's Illinois Wesleyan is the group I work with, and they had a kid who's was a starter last year. They brought a kid in out of the portal to compete with him. That kid won the job, and immediately the backup, or what now became the backups, told the coach, I want to be on the team, but you can't put me in because I'm going to go to the portal. So they are seeing it at the Division III level.
I saw early in the football season, there were 4 or 5 kids at not a Power 5 school, but then maybe the next level. There were 4 kids on that team that they had gotten off to a terrible start. They all 4 said, "That's it. We're not going to burn our red shirt. We're out." And they just bailed for the rest of the season. This is amazing what this is doing. Frustrates the life out of coaches. And from a value standpoint, this is one thing that really compromises development of loyalty right now. I wonder what we're doing to those kids, because 1, they don't learn how to battle through adversity. And 2, they don't develop any sense of loyalty beyond loyalty to themselves. And so it's a mixed bag of things. Guys, what are you hearing from coaches about how they're approaching it? Like Rich mentioned, some coaches have said, "That's it. I'm not recruiting high school kids anymore." And maybe if you're at a Power 5 school, you might be able to get away with that. But others, what are you hearing coaches use as an approach to how to handle the portal, Pete?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of go off here in a good way, I think. But I think most coaches are what Mike said. They're either going to get out or they're going to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say a couple things. I was thinking about this conversation today. I'm an old guy. If you ask me about college basketball, I'm going to tell you 90s, early 2000s, Big East basketball. I'm not sure it's worse. I think it's just different. And one of the things that Mike said is true. It's a player's game now, but there's some coaches on here. I think we all would agree at times it's been a president's game before it was the player's game. And what I mean by that is Mike does play-by-play for the ACC, and he does a great job. 10 years ago, he would have been coaching, but if he wasn't coaching and he did Notre Dame basketball games, he would have been doing Big East basketball games. And I think Notre Dame did better in basketball in Big East, but it didn't matter. They wanted that ACC flair. And if you talk to Syracuse and you talk about Jim Boeheim, let's just say, would you rather be in the Big East or the ACC? But this really came down to football, right? And that's where it began, where the money, and then people saw it, and then the whoever, players, parents, everybody wants a chunk of the money. And one of the things I wrote down, and I think we have to be really aware of this is not just in sports. This is in the workplace. This is really sad to say. It's in churches. Whichever church is going to give me a better deal, I may go there, not where God's called me. So I think we need to, I'm having a mind switch on this about athletics. And one of the things is Jacksonville State won the A-Sun, really Bellamar did, with Division II players, I might add, Bellarmine. But they had 5 guys who were 23 years old last year.
Wow.
Rick Callahan's on this call right now, and he's got a kid that's a 5th-year senior that was player of the week last week in the SoCon. Rick, help me out. What's his name?
Logan Dye.
Logan Dye. And I will tell you, when Logan was a sophomore, he was thinking about Myrtle in his English class. He was not locked in basketball, but he's 23 now, and he is playing. He's a man-child. He's lost 20 pounds. He looks different. He's gotten stronger because he's thinking about Europe.
Right.
Okay. And so coaches are going, we might not like this, but coaches are going, I can get 5 23-year-olds or I can play with 5 18-year-olds. I'm going with 23. And there is a difference. I think we know that.
Yeah.
And I even put this down. Last night, UConn got beat by Providence. They didn't get beat by Providence. They got beat by a guy from Kentucky that left Kentucky because he wasn't getting minutes there. Hopkins, he goes to Providence and has 27 last night. And so it's not just poaching, it's poaching every direction. Like, and by the way, if you're told, listen, I know you're not getting minutes in Kentucky, but you come here and I'll give you the ball. Okay. So I think there's a lot of, and I personally, I think I'm an old fart. I want out. Like I don't like this. This isn't the way it should be, but it is what it is. And we don't know if 10 years it's going to be club basketball anyhow.
Yeah. I think what somebody mentioned earlier, it's like either get out or adapt. The old guys, some of them are thinking, that's it, I'm out. The young guys know they have no choice but to adapt. They have to figure it out. They have to figure out how this works. Brian McKenzie from FCA football in the Midwest. Brian, can you tell us what you're hearing from football coaches, especially college football coaches, about both the problems that they're encountering because of the portal and what their approaches to it are? How are they trying to adapt to that?
Yeah, guys, sorry, I was a little late here. I was caught up in some stuff for the AFCA convention, but glad to be with you. Yeah, I haven't got all the rest of the conversation. My guess is across the board, there's a lot of similarities. Talking to a lot of college football coaches, just a conversation I had this week with a guy. They're still learning the difficulties. It's still new enough that they're changing from last year.
Yeah.
And so, but a lot of difficulties is, you can bring a 23-year-old in and play offensive line who's a man child against an 18-year-old, the same thing. But you also they're having to deal with, do these kids fit their program? And what they're finding out a lot, it's 23-year-old and he's 6'6" and he's 330 and he benches 600 pounds, but his character isn't what they thought it'd be. He's in it for himself. Of course, we can complain again about kids and their motivations. If we think back when we were 18 to 23 years old, what was our motivation, right? We can point fingers and say, they just quit so selfish. Yeah, well, they are. But you get enough of that on your program, it can turn the other way. And so got a lot of coaches now in the last few years have brought a lot of portal kids. Yeah, they're older, they're more experienced, and they're talented, but actually their win percentage has gone the other way. Because they brought too many kids that didn't fit their program. I just was on, and a coach this week was saying, man, we really, they had a great year 3 years ago, Big Ten team. And then because of injuries, stuff like that, because they brought some portal kids in that didn't fit their program, and it hurt the culture they'd worked so hard to build. And I think those of us who walk alongside these coaches have to keep praying for them, encouraging them to stick to their guns, especially if they're followers of Christ and the culture that they've built, to stick with that culture and do a great job of vetting. You got to bring them in. I mean, you're not going to win, or you won't have a job. You won't have a chance to impact young men, but you got to be careful, and we got to keep encouraging those coaches to stick to their guns, do a good job of vetting. And that's what more coaches that I know that are followers of Christ that are trying to do a better job with that. So they're dealing with that. And then they're also dealing with, I know you guys, I don't know if you already talked about the NIL stuff, and that's nuts.
We're going to talk about that next month. Yeah,
next month. But I mean, that's all part of it, because the portal, they're coming out and saying, hey, what can I get? And a lot of kids are leaving a team that's successful, and they're wanting to go to a team they can just make more money. Get motivation, whatever it is, it's just what it is. So they're having to deal with those things on top of all the portal stuff, and they're having to re-recruit their roster, which you all probably talked about that already. They have to re-recruit their roster every year now to try to get kids to stay. It's interesting that there's only 2 FCS football teams in the country, and until about 2 weeks ago, 2 of them that didn't have anybody go into the portal. And both of those are led by followers of Christ. One is Jed Stugart at Lindenwood University. They still haven't had anybody go in the portal. The other one is John Stiglmeyer, who's going to be in the FCS championship game on Sunday. They've had 1 kid. Now, that says a lot about their culture and how they built a culture where kids want to stay, and they're both successful. Lindenwood, first year in FCS football, won 8 football games this year.
Hmm.
So those are things, and we got FCA people working with both of those things. I sports chaplains. Yeah, they're both FCA guys, but they're sports chaplains, and just encouraging those guys to stick to their guns, and they can still win. Now there's it's nothing about bringing new kids in, but they've built a culture that they're protecting, and it's being successul. So I think we as people who work alongside these coaches, walk alongside them and minister to them, is obviously ask them what we can pray for them, but also encourage them to stick to their guns, because you don't have to. I mean, you don't have to do it the way everybody else is doing it. There may be some cases you got to fill your roster out a little bit, but you don't have to do it like everybody else is doing it and bring in a whole new team every year if you want to win. It can be done another way. So I mean, that's what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, and it's changing, year by year and probably month by month.
No
and
doubt.
another thing, and I don't know about what the basketball recruiting schedule is like. It's taken away. There's a bunch of coaches I know that aren't coming to the AFCA convention this year because they're having to recruit the transfer portal.
Yep, that's happening.
And that's taken away from their that time where they've had off to be with their families, to regroup. That's gone. The summer is gone. It used to be open for at least football coaches. That's gone because they can get on campus visits now. So all this has crowded out the personal life and the family life of coaches as well. And we've got to be sensitive to that, because they're getting less time with family because of portal. So
yep. Yeah, in summary of both the problems and the approaches kind of thing, I was talking with our head baseball coach back in the spring, or actually it was early fall, and we were talking about what is this doing to your situation in baseball. And he said, well, whereas before with baseball, you would lose 20 to 25% of your roster every year due to natural things like graduation and all that kind of thing. But he said, now I think it's going to be at least 50% turnover in my roster every year. I think basketball is approaching that. That may become the norm. It could be that in football. We don't know yet, but it could be, instead of 20 to 25% being the natural attrition rate because they go on and do other things, quit playing the game, whatever, it may be 50% or more turnover in rosters year to year. Now, what I'd like to ask you to think about and tell me your thoughts. I have a short set of them, but I'd like to have you tell me what you think are ministry opportunities that are coming to us because of these factors. This is a unique set of circumstances. Most of us have never dealt with this exact thing before, but it's going to present new ministry opportunities because of these things. Any of you, Coach Lightfoot, let me ask you first, what do you think you see coming as ministry opportunities for us because of these factors?
Well, I think you have a lot of things you can think about. I think the ministry becomes huge because there's a stress level. But first of all, ministry to the coaches.
Yeah.
I first think I'm not thinking about the athletes, because the athletes aren't in the portal. I mean, the coaches aren't in the portal like the athletes. The coaches are leaving and moving, but I think lots of times it's the unsettledness. It's the pulling alongside and making sure that we're praying for those coaches and investing in them. Because of the stress level and of the time away from their home. So I think that becomes the number one priority, is spending time with the coaching staff and understanding what they're going through as a staff, and the time commitment, the stress level, and the pain that goes with losing your top player. That if you invest in somebody and you develop them and then they leave, there's a pain. There's almost like a divorce mentality that hurts. So I think that's priority one. That of course, secondary to that, you have kids coming in, kids coming out, and being able to spend time with the kids that are coming in and developing in them and letting them know about the culture and praying with them and understanding the importance of what their faith is, what they're like. I think that becomes a huge part of the support team and the character coaches and the chaplains.
Very good. Roger Adams, I know you're in there too. Could you open your mic and talk to us? You've been doing character coaching and other forms of ministry in sport for a long, long time. What are you seeing as new ministry opportunities that are coming, or maybe just enhanced ones because of the present situation?
I like what Mike said, but also I always look at new kids as new opportunities. That's I just see those new kids. The one thing character coaches have got to learn, you can't get caught up in who's coming. You got to get caught up in who's there.
Mhm.
And a lot of times I do think that my relationship with that kid, I think you and I talked about this when the portal first started, that I thought we needed to do some kind of training with our character coaches and being able to go to the coach and say, look, this kid's telling me he's thinking about leaving. I don't want to tell you who the kid is, but I want to have your permission to talk to him. And to build up a relationship, or say to the coach before it even happens, if a kid comes and says to me, I'm thinking about moving, but I don't want to tell you, because if I tell you, it destroys the confidence. Do I have your permission just to talk to the kid and ask why, and just enter a conversation with him? So I think that creates a trust between you and the coach, which allows you to have a change in your pocket with him. And I think it helps you to help a young person understand that what you think is going to happen doesn't necessarily happen. And the experience that I've had over the years with kids that transferred because of anger, playing time, and being able to sit down and talk to them and say, how did it work out? So I think those are the ministry opportunities. And I think the other opportunity, especially for Christian coaches, is to say, and I think Pete has seen this with Donnie down there when Pete left and went back to Ball State without playing a game. Donnie and I talked about this. I think coaches need to learn the portal is that when a kid says, I want to leave, instead of taking the old school mentality, well, if you don't want to be here, get out. Say, hey, you go out and look. As long as I have your scholarship, you're welcome back. And that's pretty much what Luke did, come back and has really made a difference in the team. So I think for us to say to a kid, just because you want to look somewhere else doesn't mean you're necessarily a bad kid. So there's a ministry opportunity for the character coach to share with that kid. If you want to do this, be upfront, be a person of honor, be a person of integrity, show them what that looked like, and say to the coach, I don't know what's out there. I want to look just like when I was recruited. And a lot of that too, I think, especially for the younger guys, and Pete was bringing up the older guys, the younger guys loved the recruiting part of it because somebody was interested in them. And once they signed, that all died. Well, now it's there again.
Yeah.
And to think that a young person is going to be mature enough to go, oh, no, they like that feeling. We all like that feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think for coaches to understand it, for character coaches to be able to understand that on a spiritual level and on a human level, I think it gives us great opportunity to speak truth into those kids.
Yeah.
And into the coach too.
Daniel Hunt, you had your hand up there for a moment.
It made me think of this too. I think the greatest leaders, transformational leaders in the next generation, are going to be those leaders that can sit in the cognitive conflict that these kids are having. And exactly what you said, like, this is a whole new model. So coaches to be able to say, hey, look, I see you're frustrated, and they're willing to sit in that. Not that they're going to solve it, but that they're willing to sit in it and process through it. And if that kid still goes, that's transformational in and of itself. Hey, I still love you, man. Like, your scholarship's still here. If it is, and you're welcome back. You know what I mean? I think that's going to be huge. And I think the other thing is that looking outside of just football, basketball, and some of these sports, and looking at 25 years ago, this was our economy. It was executives bouncing from place to place, who's making the most money. All their salaries were tied into quarter profits. I mean, we're just seeing the lag into sports now and at the college level. And there's things that we can learn from that, thinking outside of the box there and saying, how have other organizations or industries kind of stood the test of time, or bounced outside and created their own model of success. So those are some of my thoughts. But I think more than anything, it's helping and encouraging those coaches to say, like, look, man, the through line is that you wanted to develop young men, and this is your opportunity to develop them. It might not help you, win a game, but it's going to help you win that kid for life, and that kid to win for life.
That's really good. Coach Lightfoot earlier used, Pete, we'll go just 1 second. Pete, Mike used the word transformational earlier, and over against being transactional. The process, the system is becoming more and more transactional. This is what it makes room for us now to be the most transformational people, where we care about those guys, whether they play for us or whether they don't, how many points they score. it becomes a more and more transactional process. And then when you next month, we'll talk about name, image, and likeness. And all that money does is throw gasoline on that transactional fire and make it bigger. Pete, you were going to have a comment, I think.
So I don't know if you could see this. Tell me, can't. All
No.
right. I can't figure out how to do it with the camera. There's a book called Paradox of Choices. It was one of the most boring books I've read, but it's very good. Okay. It's basically about a guy that went in to find a pair of jeans. And guys, this is us that are older. You're 25, 30, you either go get Levi's, Wranglers, whatever, you go in, you get jeans. He walked in to get jeans, our age, and the lady said, do you want regular, tight, special fitted, all these things, stonewashed? He's just like, I just want a pair of jeans. And then the person comes up, and if you want to go get cereal, there are 50 different types of cereals. 50. Pickles, whatever. He's going through all these choices. And the truth is that the statement made that by Daniel, and I think somebody else mentioned it, that we could sit with them through this, because I'll be honest with you, it's a lot for all of us to navigate. And by the way, does your athletic department have a marketing program? And boy, does that throw a tizzy into it.
Yeah.
We got this. It's overwhelming to a kid. Like, I'd be overwhelmed, and I don't like it, but we have to sit with them in it. And I love what Roger said. You know what? If a kid leaves and you've been able to share the gospel with them, and another kid comes in, man, share the gospel with that kid. I appreciated those.
All right, good. Brian McKenzie, again, from the football angle, what are you seeing as being new ministry opportunities that come to us partly because of this new situation?
Yeah, I think it was Roger Adams, I'm reading his name here, who said this is things that have happened, and coaches are starting to see, and character coaches and our sports chaplains that are working with them are, seeing this as an opportunity to help a kid who may be getting ready to make a really immature decision, and looking, the grass is greener on the other side, and sitting down with them instead of having the mentality of, hey, okay, you don't want to be here, I don't want you to be here anyway. Well, you know what? There's times, if you played college sports, there's times throughout the season, every single person doesn't want to be there, and if we just said, hey, if you don't want to be here, every time they thought that, well, we wouldn't have a team. So if we got to help coaches even think through that, to slow down in the midst of the emotion. And so we've had a lot of our sports chaplains do the very same thing. Hey, and the coach actually getting them involved. I want you to be involved in this. I want you to help this kid to see this in a bigger picture. And I don't know what the statistics are in other sports, but last year, I think the statistics were 50% of FBS football players that went into the portal didn't come back out.
Yeah,
that's real. They didn't go they just didn't come back out. So that has to be a kid in the midst of emotions, not thinking about that. They're not reading the statistics. They're just thinking, hey, if I can go over here, I have a better opportunity, all those kind of things. So kind of along with Roger said, that's what on the football side of things, our sports chaplains, coaches, character coaches are seeing the opportunity now to really help a kid mature and think through a big decision in their life, which may help them in a bigger decision 5 years from when they're out of college, when they're having to deal with a lot more important situations of where they're going to go play football or basketball or whatever it is. So we're seeing that too. And we're seeing coaches asking for help. Like, okay, when this kid from another school's coming, they're interested in us, we're interested in them like that. And they start talking about all the NIL stuff and just helping them evaluate what is the fit for my program. Well, a lot of coaches haven't had to think about what is a fit for my program from a 22-year-old standpoint. The 18 is different. And coming up with a list, okay, these are the things important, is that I'm interviewing this kid, is he going to be a fit for my program? And they're asking for help from a spiritual side of things, from a character side of things, from chaplains and character coaches and staff too. So that's an opportunity for all of us. I'm sure that can happen in basketball, baseball, whatever the sport is. Helping the coach be able to help that coach think through that when they're bringing somebody in. So there's tons of great ministry opportunities.
Absolutely. I'd like to drop in 4 things that I was thinking about in particular, and then I'd love to hear anybody's comments about these ideas of being either points of emphasis for our ministry with them because of this, or new opportunities that have arisen. One of them is our windows of time for ministry may just be more brief than they were before. Early on, in 28 years ago, as I would encounter a player coming in as a freshman, I knew I was probably going to get 4 or 5 years to develop relationship and to watch that kid's life grow and develop. Now my window may be 1 season. I just don't know yet. It remains to be seen. So it may add a bit of urgency to how we go about delivering things. I may not have 3 or 4 years to really develop a relationship before I get to the point of, here's the big thing, son. You need to understand this. I may have to do that in the course of a year rather than 4. Secondly, we may have a broader set of players to deal with across 4 or 5 years, exactly what Roger Adams said. Instead of us encountering, 65 basketball players across a 3 or 4 year span, it may be 120 now, just because of the way transfer portal gives us more a sense of broader opportunity than deeper, maybe. Thirdly, we, the character coaches and sports chaplains, we may become a real point of stability, of continuity, of security to the coaching staff and to the players, because everything else is turned upside down and going sideways. We may be the one point of continuity, of stability, security that they feel in all this, that we're the ones who are not, in a sense, tied up in the system. We can bring perspective to it because we're serving everybody freely and openly. We may be a great service to them just because we're not entering the portal. No. Fourthly, don't miss opportunities with players. It's kind of that same sense of urgency. Don't miss them because they may be gone tomorrow. You just don't know. Give them a chance to respond, speak to their hearts, maybe more directly than you ever would have before. Go ahead. Ask the hard question. Go ahead. Say, son, have you thought about this? Let's deal with this. What's going on in your heart that makes you want to do this? Things like that, that you may scrape away that next layer and go toward real heart-bending questions faster than you may have 10 years ago. It's worth thinking about. Any thoughts you guys have about it, those 4 points, or anything else you want to go? Will Whitmore, I see you have a hand up.
Thanks, Roger. I appreciate what you said and appreciate all this. I had well, off your first point in that urgency, I had one idea and one thing I wanted to share. But then I also had a question as well. So that if people want to leave the question for later, please feel free to. I guess one of the questions we need to ask as chaplains and character coaches is, what's the difference between urgency and the perspective of our ministry?
Yeah.
Rather than trying to fit 4 years of ministry into 1 season, what does it mean for me to see myself as a different worker in the harvest field? I'm no longer, helping these crops grow to where they once were. I'm a seed sower, and I now need to make sure that seed has someone else to water it at their next stop off and things like that. So I think some of that, because a lot of the character coaches and chaplains I know, yeah, they love the pastoral stuff, but they love digging in with discipleship over 2 to 3 years and those things. And I think it's okay for us to grieve the loss of that, but also recognize that's not a reflection of poor ministry. That's us having a different role in the harvest field. And that can still have great opportunity. And another to go with that is, what does our connection with other chaplains look like? If we know someone's going to a university or a school that we've got a connection through, AIA, FCA, even if we just Google search this person, hey, I know their chaplain, or I have a friend of a friend who knows them. Can I get you guys in touch before you leave? And so when that person gets to that program, there's already someone who knows their name, who has their phone number, can tell them where they're going to Florida, where's the local Publix, and here's where you can go for good, cheap gas, and all those little things of providing that continuity of care, as Brad said, in that regard. And my question is, and you all who are dealing with I work at a high school boarding school, so I don't have a transfer portal in that way. But I'm interested to know, coaches and chaplains, how much of this, a lot of what we've heard today is kids, kind of a grass is greener on the other side. But what does the pressure from family look like too? And how do we support young men and women who might not want to leave, but there's another coach talking to mom, and it's not just more playing time, but it's money, and it's more money and these things. And I'm interested to know what is that exterior pressure? How is that
Mhm.
feeding this?
Yep.
Because that's something that, and maybe it's not that, and I don't want to assume that, but I'm really interested, where does that play into some of these conversations?
Great question. Coach Lightfoot, you could probably speak to this as to what's the range of people who are in those players' ears all the time? Yeah, it's mom and dad, certainly, but there are other people as well.
Right.
Coach, who do you
It's
see
AAU
being those folks?
It's the AAU coaches
Yep.
who's in the ears, because it makes things better for them. It sometimes even fills their pockets up. So in reality, I think the parents, there's a part of, if someone's playing and someone's having a good experience, I don't think the parents are going to be the first one to pull the trigger and say, you got to get out of there. But the AAU coaches, their experience they've had with those people who've always wanted them to be at a higher level, or felt that it would help them to sell their AU program to say, hey, I've got this kid here. So that's the issue that we're facing more than even the parents, I think, is the AAU coaches saying, hey, I've invested in you, so I want you to go to this level. And they're always in their ear. And with that said, then you have college coaches that are in the AAU coach's ear. And then it's this voice, they become the mouthpiece of the AAU coach saying, hey, I can get you to this school. And that's happening way too much.
And
Kids are in the portal one day and they're off to another school the next day. They've already made their decision. We've got that going on, I think, at a quarterback situation here in South Bend, where before they even enter the portal, there's a lot of rumors where they're going to go.
Absolutely. Brian McKenzie, who's in the ear of football players related to this? Probably not an AAU coach, but it is somebody else who might be in those ears.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a parents but there's not AAU in football. Some of the things have grown a little bit as these traveling 7-on-7 teams, and they're probably, that's like the AAU coach. It's not as big as AAU basketball or anything like that, but there's some of that. Can we say this for sure? Definitely we can say that, yeah, there's other coaches in their ears at other schools. Somehow they're getting to them, like Mike just said there, but there's also agents that are buying and bidding for these kids already, that are potentially NFL, draft picks that are in their ear. And now with NIL, my goodness, I mean, it's and there's probably, and we know this would never happen at most schools, but there's probably alumni in their ear. I mean, all those things because of what they've opened up with the NIL and the transfer portal, anybody. But I would say the majority of it comes from the coaches, other coaches right now, football wise. I think that's where it's coming from, and maybe a third party, but it's coming, just like Mike said, in Notre Dame. That's happening all over the place. They already know where they're going. They're not going to, some of those guys aren't putting their name in the transfer portal until it's a done deal. Then they put it in there, and then it's just a formality. So I hate to say that, but they've opened the can of worms and they can't control it.
Yep. And to Will's first point about, okay, yes, that kid's gone from my place, he's going to this other. It is incumbent upon us as character coaches, as sports chaplains, to do everything we can to help that kid connect to his next spot. We had a player last year transfer to Wofford. And so one of my first calls was to the FCA guy around Wofford and see if I could connect that basketball player to somebody on that campus. Did the same. We had a player go to Weber State. And I mean, it's out in the middle of nowhere in Utah, but I happen to have friends in that town, and I connected my friends with this basketball player, and I got a FaceTime from them back in the fall where my friend, the basketball player, was over at my friend's house, and they were having dinner together with his family. And I'm going, yes, this is it. Because it gave, as Brad Kinney mentioned, a continuity of care beyond my person. And so that's important. We have to take the pains and work hard to get that done. There's no easy system to this. We have to ask the questions of the people who are well networked in our respective ministries to say, hey, who do we know at, left-handed Panhandle State? Let's find that guy and let's make it work.
And there are more out there now than ever before. I mean, chaplains, character coaches, guys who are on staff paid by the universities now that are serving the exact same role. Some of them used to be AIA, FCA, private, any kind of, they're now being paid by the university. So the opportunity to connect a kid now is greater than ever before. So that's just up to us to do our homework, and it's not very hard to find them. So if you can't find a chaplain, go look on their coaching staff and see it's a player development guy, and his job is really the chaplain character coach. So the opportunity to do what Will was just, Mike was just saying, is out there better than ever.
Yep. Randy Graham, I know you have a question. You're muted, Randy. There you are.
I've got a comment.
Go ahead, Rick.
Okay, so Mike mentioned this earlier, and it caught my attention. He said something about the families of the athletes when we have opportunities to get to know them better. And so I have found, at least at the school where I'm serving, that is a huge deal to our head coach. I spend a lot of time trying to get to know the families of athletes. I make contact with them when they come. It's got to the point now that, when they come to a game, they'll say hello to me first. They'll take the initiative to do that. And, at times I'll sit with a parent at least at halftime and talk with them. And one of the things that I found about that is, and I didn't realize it was connected with the portal and all that, and it may not be at our school, but my head coach did come up to me a few weeks ago and said, "Hey, thank you for connecting with our parents." And hearing some of the things you guys are saying, it would let me know, hey, that's a point of interest for him. That's something that he really cares about, and maybe he doesn't have time to do it as well as he'd like to. So that's a ministry opportunity that we could all plug into, is just helping make those connections. If something's going on in the family that we find out about first, let the coach know. I thought something really great that happened at the first of last season was Coach called me in the middle of the summer, and he said, "Hey, we got this new recruit coming in. I think you're really going to like him. Here's his phone number. Why don't you call and talk to him?" And when I did, he introduced me to his mom over the phone.
Wow.
And had a conversation. So that's been a good opportunity for me to be able to sit and do that.
That's really wise. And I think that's probably even more so. Most of us would have said, yes, all this is an intensely relational enterprise that we're doing, but maybe even more so now in terms of depth of relationships with family and with their extended circle of who cares for them, maybe more than ever as we serve the team, not just that player, not just the coach, but the whole team. The more depth of relationship and even down to the families, probably even more. Randy Graham, are you able to talk to us now? I'm trying to see. He's having trouble getting phone calls in.
Well, Roger, while you wait, or you got him?
No, I think go ahead, Pete.
Okay. Two things I would tell you guys. I want to tell you about a read that you don't want to do because it's ugly, but it is informative. It's called Black Market. And Tim Carter, who's on our staff, told us to read it. It's basically the story of the guy that was with Adidas with the shoe thing, but he worked for Nike before that. You need to read that to understand college basketball, how it really works at the Division I level. Unbelievable book. And the second thing, and I understand what Mike's saying, but I think we need to be very careful, and I think Mike would agree with me on this. I think we can't tell kids, I hate the portal. You can't say that. And I'm going to tell you why. There's a guy that's coaching the #1 JUCO team in the country, Salt Lake City, Kyle Taylor. He was a D3 coach at Covenant. You all remember the worst semifinal Final Four game ever was UNC Oklahoma. You guys remember that game? 40-point game? Here's what happened. Oklahoma came into the huddle and said 1, 2, 3 family, but 3 of those assistants already had jobs somewhere else.
Wow.
So when they were doing film and stuff for that game, or were they recruiting players for the team they're about to go to, there was always that question. Kids we need to make sure that we don't say it because kids are going to turn around. I've had them do it. Coaches leave all the time. Now, Mike's an anomaly, and that's why Mike was special because he believed in what he was doing. But I think we all need to be aware. Kids, if we say that, they're going to throw that in your face.
Yeah, good call. Randy Graham, are you able to have a mic now?
I'm trying. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, we got you now.
Oh man, that's awesome. See, I had my office manager came in and said, "Let me take care of this for you." And he did one thing and everything went blank. So that's what I get for asking for help when I do it either. And I'm sorry, I may be repeating what somebody said because I was off the call for about 3 minutes. But I wanted to piggyback on what somebody was saying about transfers and when they go to another school, another community and connecting them. And we've had, this year, 3 guys from Winthrop did transfer, and they were coincidentally 3 guys I was closest with. And one thing I have found is getting them connected is part of it. Staying connected is the other part of it, because with each of the guys, I've been to see 2 of the 3 play. And I stay in communication with them, and I can just tell from their responses that it really means something that they've transferred from Winthrop. They're not playing for Winthrop anymore, but that relationship truly was not based on the jersey they wore, but on the relationship we had. And I think that's an important ministry opportunity that we do have, is not unintentionally letting them go on somewhere else and have their own season and have their own life, but as best we can, staying connected, staying interested, and showing we love them wherever they are.
That's really good. I really appreciate that. It's a unique privilege that we're given to have access to these people's lives, and then just to have it cut off because they change schools or something really kind of shortchanges the process. The more we can stay engaged with them, frankly, this has been some of the greatest joy of my having served for 28 years now is looking back at how many weddings I've been able to be a part of from players from 10 years ago, or saying, Raj, would you do our wedding? And staying connected beyond their service with the university has really been big. Here's details on the book that Pete mentioned, Black Market by Merle Code. Here's what the cover looks like. It's a unvarnished look at the world of basketball and shoe companies and AAU and all of that stuff. It may have you wanting to take a hot shower after you finish the thing, just because it feels a little slimy in terms of the industry that basketball has become. But it's really, really insightful as to the machine of how this thing actually works. Turning toward home here, I want to ask a couple of summary thoughts, if I may, from Coach Lightfoot and from Coach Brian McKenzie to help us think big picture. Given what we're given with the transfer portal, how do we serve best in light of it? The book was Black Market by Merle Code. Go ahead, Coach Lightfoot, please.
Well, I think that nothing should change in the ministry area, that we need to continue to be close and understand our why and what we're trying to do in the ministry area. There's been some very good points that sometimes that's not going to be a 4-year opportunity, but when they're there, it is another opportunity.
Good.
And I go back to the coaches side of things. I think one of the things that's very important, that coaches are dealing with so much more than they ever dealt with before.
Mm-hmm.
They're still dealing with the COVID thing. I was just reading the article about Fran McCaffrey's son at Iowa that stepped aside from basketball because of anxiety issues. Those things have all come about. The mental health issues are bigger than they ever were before. And so we've got that issue. We've got the NIL and we have the portal. Now that's affecting our student athletes in many, many ways, but also affecting our coaches in huge ways, and their families, because the time-consuming time that they're going to be away from their home, recruiting the portal, and it's nonstop. So I think that a huge opportunity there is being able to come alongside and minister to the coaches' wives, the coaches' family, and make sure that they're okay. Because if they're not okay, then the players are not going to be okay.
Yep, well said. Coach Brian McKenzie. Hey, Brian, are you still with us? Looks like we may have dropped him. Yep. Nope. He's gone. That's a great summary, Coach. Let me mention one thing as we wrap things up today. Our next Zoominar of similar thing will be on 2nd of February. And it's coming up Thursday, the 2nd day of February, same 1 o'clock Central Time. But there we're going to be talking about name, image, and likeness money, what that's doing to this process, and how do we serve effectively in light of it. It's going to complicate things for sure, but how do we serve in light of that most effectively? We'll be talking about that. We'll invite in some people, either the guys who are offering a whole bunch of NIL money to character coaches. No, those guys don't exist. So we'll be talking to somebody about name, image, and likeness and how that's impacting ministry in sport. May I please ask Randy Graham, would you, sir, wrap things up by praying?
Yes, sir. You can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Heavenly Father, thank you for this conversation, and thank you for where you've placed each of us specifically where we are. And Lord, we confess that really kind of scratch our heads sometimes and to say we don't know what to do. But Father, we know that you have us standing in a place where you have nobody else standing, and that's for a purpose and a reason and under your will. So I do pray for guidance as we encourage and support and care for and love both coaches and players. Help us just to show love and kindness and grace and understanding and all those things that only come from you. It's a difficult time, Father, but we know that your word never comes back void. And I pray that you'd use us in some small or some large way to make a difference with coaches and kids all around. Thank you for Roger and his leadership. I thank you for the men on this call and pray that you'd continue to protect and cover our families. Guide us and use us in your will, Father. Thank you again for this time. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.